Hey everybody, it's Tommy Canale and welcome to Before the Lights podcast. This show to find out how those in sports, music, and entertainment made their mark. To get the extra 5 and become members of the BTL crew, go to patreon.com/beforethelights. That's patreon.com/beforethelights. Joining us today is the founder and chief wine officer for SommSelect. He served as the U.S. ambassador for Krug Champagne of France and one of just over 200 Master Sommeliers in the world. He was named Best Young Sommelier in the World under 35 years old and was featured in the wine documentary called SOMM. Please welcome to the show, Ian Cauble. Ian, how are you?
I'm great. Thanks for having me on.
I am excited to talk to you. I love wine. I wouldn't say I'm a wine snob. I guess people may say I am, but I know I have listeners that are definitely wine enthusiasts, so this is going to be fun.
Well, I'm excited.
Before we get into the whole wine thing, and we'll get there, grew up in Huntington Beach, California, attended Marina High School.
Yeah.
Father was a chiropractor. Was your father's career something you thought about following in his footsteps at first?
I did. I went to Sonoma State. My sisters went there. So I grew up, pretty much on the tennis court or with the surfboard in my hand. And I grew up right in Huntington Harbor, right next to Bolsa Chica Beach. So I was always surfing or playing tennis. And then my sisters went to Sonoma State and I went up there and I remember just like tasting the food at the local farmer's market. And I was like blown away, the culture, the beauty. Sonoma County is this incredible place. And so I went up there and I followed my sisters because I'm really close with my family, ended up trying to doing pre-med. And then I realized I did not like chemistry, I did not like physics, and the whole, world of chiropractic was a little bit more challenging at the time because of certain developments with insurance. And my dad said, hey, maybe it's not the best avenue for your future right now, but it's still going to be there if you want it. And then I started learning about wine and I totally shifted my whole understanding because I got bit by the wine bug. And I think anybody listening knows that the first time you have that like aha moment, food and wine experience, whether that be a really good glass of Sauvignon Blanc with goat cheese and a tomato with really good sea salt and olive oil, and your mind blows up and you're like, this is all I want to do. I just want to live through my palate and my nose and be around my favorite people in the world and eat and drink and be merry. And then so I just followed the path of learning about wine and business. And so I ended up, getting a degree in Spanish and wine business. And that's a fraction of the story, but that's kind of the beginning.
You have a passion for obviously travel, food, wine, and I also understand music. What type of genres of music does Ian enjoy?
I love everything. I really, I grew up listening to, Bob Marley, Nirvana, the Beatles, Pearl Jam. But, I listen to the whole world. I love Spotify. My Spotify, $7.99 a month gets its use. But I'm always looking to explore a lot of Scandinavian music, whatever's going on. But I do have a soft spot in my heart for some really good classic reggae, Grateful Dead, a lot of the classics. But as long as it sounds good, it's not like, I like great jazz. But other than that, music and wine, people, food, it's all a part of the symphony of life that I want from 6 to 9 every day.
Yeah, it definitely all ties together, the whole music thing. You talked about just a minute ago how close you are with your family. Talk about the importance of the support from your family to get you through where you're at today.
I think, while you're going through life, just knowing that you have a support system, it just makes you feel more confident. My dad was a successful chiropractor, so I always had, food in the refrigerator. I was very lucky, right? I was very lucky to have family that just provided for me what I needed. And I basically, no matter where I was in my life, we can talk about my travels in Europe, and I came home broke and borrowed $100 from my dad to buy a Calvin Klein suit, walked in the wine merchant of Beverly Hills. We could talk about that later.
I got that coming.
Just being able to know, that I came home, with $0 and having a dad who can lend me $100, that's support,
Yep.
And so, and not everybody has that blessing in life. And I definitely, don't go a day without realizing how lucky I've been to have, a healthy, happy family that's very supportive. And, loving and just supporting each other. I think that's a huge thing in life, and I don't take it for granted, for sure.
What's your first memory of wine?
Man, my first memory of wine, you know what? I'm going to tell you the truth. And it was drinking too much Carlo Rossi in high school out of red solo cups. And we drank way too much. And we were at my buddy's house, and it was, I'm not going to get into the gory details, but It wasn't so pretty in the morning. But we drank we had jug wines of Carlo Rossi. That's honestly my first, I haven't never thought that that's actually my first memory of like real wine, because my early memories that I don't remember, that I'm told my dad would give me tastes of like old vintages of Mouton Rothschild from Bordeaux. It's the first growth. And, but I don't remember that. But in terms of like, if you asked me point blank what my first memory was, drinking jug wines of Carlo Rossi in high school out of red solo cups. It's not exactly like something I want to brag about, but it's just the truth. And I think sometimes you just got to say it.
I remember those jugs of Carlo Rossi myself.
It wasn't so good, but you were just learning about the world. You're right. 15 or 16, and you're testing things out. I'll just leave it at that. And my palate has grown a little bit since then.
You've been to Morocco, India, Monaco, Austria, but you worked at an Australian pub in London.
How did you know all about this? This is great.
I do some research on my guests.
That's amazing. So I'll give you the gist of what happened. So I graduated at Sonoma State. I had a bunch of money saved from teaching tennis. And so I basically took off and I got a job working for $2 an hour in Portugal, right? So we're living in this town called Favaios, next to Pinhão, in the north, kind of east of Portugal in the Douro Valley. And I spent 3 months there. And then I went to Madrid, kind of for an ATP tennis tournament that I wanted to watch Federer, Nadal, all the great guys of the world. So I ended up in Madrid, living in Madrid for a month. And then this house I was living in, and I was teaching tennis to these kids on clay court, trying to perfect my Castilian Spanish, and it's different. Like, just because you get a degree in Spanish doesn't mean you can really get along with the high classic Spanish of the world. So I really wanted to perfect my Spanish. So I did that. And then one day I woke up and I didn't have a place to stay because the house I was renting fell through. And I opened up the Lonely Planet, and I realized that I could be in Morocco in 24 hours if I went to this train station or this bus station that was 20 minutes away. So I literally jumped on a bus, sat next to this kid from Venice, California named Sam, who's incredible. We're buddies to this day. But I sit next to him, and we basically spent 12 hours driving through Spain, got on a boat where the bus parked, and then didn't realize in Morocco during Ramadan, right? So people aren't eating during the day, the Muslim culture. I grew up in Orange County, right?
Right.
Pretty much with a surfboard. And then next thing I'm like, people are, chanting to their gods in the middle of the day. They're praying. And it was a super intense cultural experience. So I ended up spending a few months in Morocco, living on the beaches of Essaouira, going to Katama and the Chefchaouen and the Rift Mountains, and exploring the culture there, which I won't go too much into, but it's very unique. If you just type in Katama, you'll see what they do there. But other than that, I ended up meeting these two guys that drove me then to Germany, and lived in this little town called Rheine, southeast of Amsterdam, for a few weeks. And then I ended up, my goal was to get to St. Anton and Marlberg for the ski season. So I was a snowboarder, and I was talking to my dad when I was in Morocco, and I was like, hey, I don't know what I'm going to do this winter. He's like, you should just go to Austria, go to this mountain, and life's going to take care of itself. So I got a ski season pass, ended up in St. Anton for 4 months, and had like waist deep powder every day for literally like 80 days. And then so I ran out of money pretty shortly thereafter, and it wasn't the plan. I didn't realize it because I wasn't really looking at my funds very accurately, because it was like 1.6, euros to the dollar kind of thing, right? So you're losing 50% on it every time you spend a dollar. And I've learned more about accounting since then. So I ended up in Monaco trying to get a job as like a tennis teacher on a yacht, or like an assistant chef, and then ended up, coming in contact with these Northern Algerian like gangsters who tried to like jump me and my friends one day. And we ended up having to jump this fence with spikes on it. And I cut my hands, but it turns out that the guy who kind of started it all, his dad was a billionaire from Australia. And so I ended up living in this penthouse for 6 weeks while my hands healed. And such a crazy story. I can't believe I'm telling you. But and so I ended up healing my hands, and then ended up moving in with this girl I met from Norway. And I lived in London for 4 or 5 months while I saved money to go to India. So I ended up in India by myself, met these incredible people at the airport, traveled through northern India, Parbati Valley, Manali, Goa, Kerala, Almora, and then just incredible. And then I have goosebumps thinking about it. But then I came back and of course was out of money, and I knew I wanted to get a job in the wine business. And my dad said, you need to go to the Wine Merchant of Beverly Hills. And I was like, I need a suit. And he was like, all right, Macy's has a sale. And I went, I think it was actually $139 suit on sale. And I just, my dad taught me kind of how to tie the tie, because now I love ties. Right. But I was 24, and my dad's teaching me how to tie a double Windsor. And I walked in the Wine Merchant, and they're like, we'll give you a job, $14 an hour. It's like, sounds great. And then spent the next 2 years drinking the greatest wines in the world, having actors, actresses, producers, directors coming in and asking my opinion and inviting me to their houses. And they wanted to spend money and drink wine with people who had passion. So I learned through tasting and studying. And at a certain point, I learned about what a master sommelier was. And I was like, God, this is what I'm doing. I'm opening wine for people. I'm teaching them about it. I'm reading books. And then I learned about the Court of Master Sommeliers, and I basically ended up passing my certified exam in 2006 and the intro and certified, and then just followed the path. And I was just super inspired by the knowledge and the professionalism of the master sommeliers that were teaching me. And I just wanted to be like them. I wanted to be somebody that knew everything about the greatest things in the world. And for me, that's food and wine. And it ties in, of course, music and culture and travel. Mm-hmm. And that's thankfully what I get to do with my life. I travel, I learn, and I cook, I eat, I drink. I spend time with amazing people who want to share those experiences. And thankfully, SommSelect was launched shortly after, so I ended up, taking my advanced exam, which is the third level for the court in 2008. I failed and watched a bunch of my friends pass, and it was really depressing. And I realized I wasn't prepared, right? And I was living in Vegas. I was working under a bunch of masters, but I hadn't put the time in. I didn't put the work in. And I showed up and I saw how prepared other people were that, I saw their flashcards and the information they were studying. I was like, God, I'm like an amateur showing up to a professional golf tournament, and I can't even, hit out the sand, right? So I ended up studying my tail off for the next year. And I came back and I got the Red Scholarship the next year, which was the top score. And then I got an early invite to the master's exam, which I wasn't expecting, but Fred Dame called me and said, hey, you got the top score. And I want to invite you in a month to take the master's exam. And this was like 4 months after I passed. There's people that dropped out of the master's test. And I was like, I don't want to take this test in 3 weeks. I need 2 years to study for this. And he's like, no, we think you're ready to take it. And I was like, I don't want to do it. And he's like, Ian, if you don't accept this invitation, I'm never going to forgive you. And I said, I'll be there. And that was Fred Dame. Fred Dame, he's like the godfather of the court. If you see like SOMM 3, for example, he's there. And, I went in there with nothing to lose, and I passed one of the 3 portions. But long story short, that's right when the SOMM documentary started being filmed. So, the Jason Wise from the SOMM movie called me, like he found out I got an invitation. He's like, I want to follow you with the camera. And I was like, already nauseous thinking about showing up to a test, and to be the first person that's followed into it with a camera documenting it was not really an exciting thought. But I was like, all right. He's like, it's going to be okay. We have approval. And we showed up to the test, and it turns out like half of the people didn't know what was going on. So it was a very awkward situation. But sorry to ramble on. That
trip through all those different countries, that should be a documentary in itself on the whole path.
Yeah, I it should be written down. I mean, if I got into some of even the mini stories within those mini stories, like that 16 months over in Europe was one for the record books, and it definitely added character, to me, and it's been an incredible thing to look back on how special that was. That teaching tennis and other entrepreneurial activities in college allowed me to have the means to travel, and traveling is such an important thing. And for me, that's what life's about. It's getting out of your comfort zones and smelling these smells in, Old Delhi or the mountains of India or Morocco. It's like, it's such a different experience than being in America, where everything's a little bit more, vanilla and typical, and the streets are not, lined with cows causing traffic jams kind of thing. And you go through it, you come home and you realize really what a special place we do get to live in. And, America is quite amazing when you actually look at what we have here.
Let me back up just a little bit. Was your aha moment when you took a wine trip to Chile?
That was, the first time I really saw the incredible culture of food and wine. Of course, I was tasting great wines in Napa and Sonoma. I had some friends that were working as kind of servers for different catering companies when I was in college. They would bring back really special bottles of Cabernet that were left over from an event at Frog's Leap, for example. But right before my senior year, I realized that I'd need credits for Spanish and my business degree. And you had these elective credits you need to do. So I could sign up for this trip to Chile and do a month in Chile and get like a half a semester worth of work done to eat and drink and travel through wineries for a month. So it seemed like a good plan. So I ended up for this 14-day, kind of intensive, wine trip. And then I spent another couple of weeks there by myself. But sitting on the beaches of Viña del Mar outside of Santiago and having like seafood soup with a chilled glass of Sauvignon Blanc at the sunset and the vineyards. And that was kind of the moment when I was like, all right, I wonder how I can organize my life to be able to do more of this. That was pretty much the thought. And I realized that the more I learned about wine and the more I could, be able to speak about wine, the more that this would be a part of my lifestyle. So, Chile has some incredible wines. My favorite wines in the world are from Europe, from France, but I do have a soft spot in my heart for Chilean wines, in particular, Old Vine Carmenere, a lot of great Sauvignon Blancs from the coast. But Chile is a very special place.
I'm going to sprinkle in a few questions about wine as we go, and I'm going to do a couple here. When you're pouring wine, how much should somebody pour out to have a glass?
5 ounces is the typical. Ounces. So 5 ounces, it's kind of like, imagine if you start pouring slowly, you're pouring about an ounce per second. And so if you look at the actual glass, you don't want to pour above the curve. Okay. So imagine the curve, it's a circle, right? You don't want imagine a Burgundy stem. It's a big bowl. Mm-hmm. You don't want to pour more than the halfway point. And that's in a Burgundy stem, that's probably 7 ounces. So it's a little bit below the curve, but if you pour above that and you say you have like a small, all-purpose wine stem and you pour it to the top, we call that a country club pour. So, when somebody holds out the glass, pour it to the top, honey, right? And you get the glass of Chardonnay and it's like poured literally and there's like a half inch left at the top. That's what we joke is a country club pour. But you can't smell the wine if you pour it to the top, right? There's organic compounds and esters and all of these things that are in the liquid, right? And when you swirl the glass, you want it to be about a third full so you can properly swirl the glass, and it volatilizes the aromas from liquid into gas. And the gas is these molecules that is the fermentation of grapes that those molecules hit your olfactory bulb and they send messages of smell to your brain. So mostly what you smell and what you taste is the same, but in terms of what you're tasting, you don't really taste through your palate. You only have sweet, sour, salty, bitter, and then umami on the palate. So your palate doesn't taste anywhere close to the complex hundreds of aromas that when you're actually tasting a wine, the aromas are going back through your throat into your olfactory bulb. And that's where you actually are getting your taste. So, there's hundreds and hundreds of incredible flavors that you can have in wine. Some of them are very bad. Some of them are very good. It depends on how they were made. If there was sulfur used, if it's a non-sulfured wine that was heated up, it can smell like Chewbacca made it, like Chewbacca from Star Wars. Like imagine if you fell in the fermenter while it was being made. Sometimes wines can smell like animals. Sometimes they can smell like strawberry dreams. Sometimes they can smell like olive and black pepper and meat and cold blueberries, like Northern Rhone, which is one of my favorites, like the great wines of Hermitage and Côte Rôtie. Very good Burgundy, for example, like Musigny, Bonnemar, Romani Conti. They can smell literally like a magical forest, and you're picking these like fresh small blueberries and strawberries, and there's this forest floor and wet leaves and compost and mushrooms and like this kind of like, damp tree bark and like these amazing complex aromas that like, it just excites you so much, just like listening to the most beautiful, Mozart, right? There's something special about that. But the same symphony can happen in terms of your olfactory bulb, and your sense of smell is incredible, just like our sense of sight is incredible, our sense of hearing, right? These are all unique ways that we experience the world. And for me, the nose, and, it just, also a little bit of alcohol in the bloodstream definitely elevates the mood sometimes. So all of these things together, of course, tie back to the country club pour is not ideal. So that was my point.
Does the type of glass make a difference to the wine? Yes,
big time. There's a company called Riedel. It's not Riedel. So Riedel makes football helmets. Riedel makes glasses, and they have these kind of seminars. So, and they show you, like, imagine you went to a wedding in 1987 at a Marriott, right? And that big thick glass that's angled and you can't smell anything out of. They've evolved the glasses to be thinner, larger, with more space between the liquid, allowing the volatilization of the molecules to be able to be in their ideal form. And also the way that the actual glass delivers the liquid to your tongue on the right spot. So glasses are very important. The best glass in the world is Zalto, Zalto. They're about $50 to $60 a stem. The Zalto all-purpose stem will change your complete perception of wine, just like when you get a really good speaker system, right? And everyone has their friend that invested in a crazy speaker system at their house, and you play an album you've always loved. And if you play that album on a Walkman from 1990 or a speaker that's an incredible system, the same CD or the same tape will be a completely different experience. The same thing with glasses, right? If you have a really good glass in a really bad wine, that bad wine is going to taste even worse out of the good glass, right? But if you have a great wine out of a great glass, it's like putting that old Beatles album on the most incredible sound, and it just, it hits the soul a little bit differently. So glasses are big, and so is service temperature. Those are the two most important things. Wine quality first, but also service temperature and glassware.
Okay, so before you give out temperature, the stemless craze of glasses going in then is not a typical good glass to drink wine out of.
The stemless glass, I don't mind. Like if you have a large enough stemless glass, the only problem with stemless glass is you have to hold it, and your body's 98 degrees and your wine should be 60 or 65 degrees for a red wine. So you're constantly warming up your glass. So if you're sitting there, and you're eating the bruschetta, you have a glass of Italian white wine that's in your hand, not only is your, olive oil fingerprints all over the stem, but you're warming up your glass. So for me, that's why a stem is good. But listen, I have a little Airstream we take out to the coast, and I have stemless glasses in it because they store well. And I'm at the beach looking at the sunset with stemless glass, and life's okay.
Life's okay.
But if I'm at a restaurant, I want a stem. These are all first world problems, like not having a stem on your glass, right? So these are the particularities that don't really matter too much. But if we're going to get into the details, stem, good glassware with a nice stem, because the stem doesn't translate heat to the glass and allows you to kind of keep your glass somewhat clean. So that's why I tell people when I teach wine, don't hold the glass by the bowl. All of your fingerprints end up making the glass totally dirty, like a dirty windshield after a road trip. You want to keep your glass looking clean. It's just a part of the enjoyment of it for me.
What's the good temperature then for white and red?
So it depends. If you're talking about a really inexpensive white, serve it at 35 degrees. I'm just kidding. Like the colder, the better if it's a really cheap wine, because it kind of locks in the aroma, which is not always so pleasing. But the really best white wines of the world should be served around 50 to 55 degrees.
Okay.
And with that, I'm talking about really great Burgundy, great Chardonnay. But for the most part, if you have wine at refrigerator temperature, which is around 38 to 42 degrees, take it out about 15 minutes before service and pop the cork, right? And that's usually perfect temp for Champagne, Chablis, Gruner Veltliner, Albarino, even California Chardonnay. That's really buttery. I like it a little colder because it kind of holds the acidity seems to be a little warmer. But the really great Chardonnays of the world coming from like Puligny Montrachet and Meursault, Chassagne Montrachet, serve those at roughly cellar temperature, which is around 55 degrees, because you want all of those incredible aromas that you spent $150 on this bottle. You want all of those aromas. You don't want to bleep the comedian, right? Mm-hmm. And so you want to basically make sure that you're giving your nose the chance to absorb every single piece of this being of this wine in front of you, because sometimes they're just magical. So if you have a wine that's at 38 degrees or 60 degrees for a white, one of them is going to give you 100% of the aromas. One of them is going to smell like cold liquid, right, with a little lemon. And so temperature and the chemistry involved with, why molecules volatilize from liquid into gas, there's just a lot that goes into it. With that said, for reds, I think most people drink white wines too cold and red wines too warm. Red wines should not be served at room temperature. Room temperature, depending on where you are. If you're in a Kentucky, RV with no air conditioning in the summer, it's 90 degrees in your room. If you're near a castle in February in Edinburgh, it's 49 degrees, right? What's the temperature of your room? Average room temperature is 72, but I'd say most red wines should be served around 60 to 65, 68.
Okay.
And it's 65 degrees. I don't know if you've been in the ocean when it's 65 is cold.
Yeah.
Because a lot of red wines have a lot of alcohol. So the warmer you serve them, the more the wine's going to smell like alcohol, because the warmer the temperature is, the volatilization of the alcohol is hitting your nose. So instead of smelling these beautiful molecules of strawberries and, these delicate mushrooms, you're smelling alcohol, and it's completely like, somebody's putting on nail, like somebody's taking off their nail, like my wife's taking off their nail
polish,
nail polish off. Yeah. That's sometimes these ripe California wines can smell like that if they're served too warm. But if you have the same wine and it's 75 degrees in your house, right? And you take that same wine, you put it in the freezer for 15 minutes and gets it down to 55, you put it in a decanter, comes up to 60 degrees and you pour it, that same wine is a totally different experience, just like hanging out with someone on the Las Vegas Strip and it's 110, right? Versus you're sitting in an air-conditioned restaurant, right? People have a different personality. Wine completely changes depending on the temperature you serve it, the glassware, the place. There's so many variables to wine enjoyment, but the basics are temperature, glassware, and good company.
How many bottles of wine did you go through to become a master sommelier?
That's scary. I don't know. Let me ask my liver. I'm going to guess, geez. So from 2004, let me say it, 300. I'm going to guess at least 10,000 tastes. Wow. And 3 to 5,000 consumed bottles. I'm going to guess. Over like that 8 to 9 years, you're drinking wine after work, tasting all day and spitting wine too. But I'm gonna guess it's, that 10,000 hour rule applies to wine too. It's like that 10,000 bottles probably.
That's a lot of wine.
That's the only way to master a subject.
That's true. That is true.
You have to taste the good, the bad, the ugly. You have to understand why it's good, bad, and ugly, and be able to, share that with people who are passionate. Like, it's a lot of people that are customers at SommSelect. They look to us because they're a specialist, and there might be a lawyer, a doctor. And, if I have a problem and I have to go to the doctor, I expect them to be, the specialist. But if people come to us and they want to drink well, and they say you have $35 a bottle to spend, you can get amazing wines, but you have to know where to look. You're not getting amazing Napa Cabernet for $35, but you can get really great Sicilian red for $35, or German Pinot, or Oregon Pinot, or Beaujolais, for example, Argentine Malbec. But that's why SommSelect is a great resource for people, is because, this is what we do all day. We taste wines, and I still taste 100 to 150 wines a week, which isn't that much. Because of COVID, we don't taste as much as we could, because we're kind of not having people come to the office and taste us on the wine. So we have about 50 to 150 samples delivered every week, and every Wednesday we taste through them. And I also try to travel to Europe every year, but that kind of got put on hold because of the current pandemic.
Yeah.
Other than that, I'll tell you what, tasting, that's really my life. I taste wine, and we find great wines. We really try to support people who are respecting the vineyard and respecting the soil, respecting the environment, not spraying pesticides and herbicides and Roundup, a lot of these carcinogenic things that we shouldn't be putting in our food, in my opinion. So a lot of our focus in SommSelect is really making wines supporting farmers who are really treating the earth with respect and doing the work, and not just doing the work by, there's conventional farming where you can go through and drive a tractor and spray chemicals on the soil, or you can bring compost naturally that was, composted and give energy to the soil, versus spraying laboratory products in the earth. So with that said, we go into a lot about farming, and farming is a big part of great wine.
I'm going to bring up something with the farming in a minute. We brought up SommSelect. Folks, go to my show notes. I'm going to put a link to SommSelect.com. It's a free subscription website for knowledgeable and wine enthusiasts. Exceptional wine delivered to you. GQ said it's one of the best wine subscriptions according to the In the Know Sommeliers, and by New York Magazine, the best overall wine subscription. So you have a great product. You've talked about how you're really choosing the great wines to make sure you're getting the best wine to your customers. What's the difficulty then in shipping wine?
Oh, geez. That's the challenge. Well, because, wine is delicate, right? So just like, if you buy a hammer off of Amazon, right, you can ship that in 120 degree weather into the heart of Arizona in the middle of summer, and it's going to be no problem, right? Mm-hmm. So with SommSelect, we do it. The heart and soul was like the daily offer. You sign up for this daily email, we send it to you. We also have concierge, we have clubs, we have blind tasting kits, we have all these things. But to ship them during the heat involves, it's challenging, because you don't want the wine to get above, say 80 to 85 degrees, right? Think about the water off Waikiki in summer is about 85 degrees. It doesn't feel hot, but it's warm. So any above that, wine starts to degrade. So we have a, continuation of cold shipping channels in the summer, and it's expensive, because they have to leave our dock, they have to go to a hub, and then they have to leave in air-conditioned trains to a certain hub. And then we open up the packages and put cold packs in it. And then it goes to another hub and hopefully gets delivered that day. But if you're not home to sign for the package, it goes back to an 84 degree hub in Miami. And, not to say that a wine's going to go bad at 84, but it will at 92 or 95. So the logistical challenges of getting a wine that's perishable to an individual is great 8 months out of the year, but from, May till I'd say June until October 1, it's tough. That's why we have a summer hold program, that if you buy something from us during the warm months, we just save it for you. I mean, all these wines are, these are like, it's like the stock market. They're getting better with time. Most of the wines that we sell are not the wines that taste great today. They're obviously, most of them are going to be about 6 months to 10 years drinkability. And we talk about that in our offer. If you see our daily offer, we talk about the service temperature, the glassware, how long you decant it. We give you a recipe to pair it with. So we really give you that whole table side, quote unquote, experience that you would at a nice restaurant when the sommelier is presenting and teaching about the wine. But you also spend 3 to 4 times the price in a high-end New York City restaurant than a very fairly priced retail wine. That same wine is literally usually double to 2 to 4 times the cost. So with that said, there's so many challenges that starting SommSelect, you thought it was going to be one thing, and it ends up being logistics. Logistics are not something that I want to do with my life. And luckily we have a lot of smart people that are helping us in terms of getting the wines, these really beautiful wines that are sitting here in this cold warehouse in Sonoma, and going through all the necessary steps to get them safely to the customer, and have that bottle be that incredible symphony that we talk about. But one thing that gets in your way is heat,
which is me in Vegas.
I used to live there. I know what it's like. I know what it's like pulling up to the Mandalay Bay 120 degree parking lot, and you're sweating through your suit, and then you get into the air conditioning and you're freezing. We've all been there. I used to work in Vegas for years, and that was a place where I really learned the most about wine, because there's so much gambling money that these, the princes of Dubai would show up and have guests, and they want to spend 30 grand on wine, but nobody would drink it. They would just like smell it. And so they would leave these like 30 or 40,000 of wine, like on the table. Wow. And I would have to call the local sommeliers, be like, come help me drink all this 1990 Petrus and 82 and 95. And Vegas is a totally different world, man. And I don't know if I started talking about that, but Vegas changed my life, because Vegas, allowed all this money came in, and people would want to spend absurd amounts of money to drink these artifacts of like 1929s and 28s and 49s and 55s. And you can't afford these, right? When you're making X dollars a year as a 26-year-old, you might have $6,000 in the bank, but that doesn't even cover a quarter of one of these bottles, right? That you're opening.
Right.
And so you're literally, some nights I would drink $20,000 or $25,000 of the wine, and you're within a bottle and a half. And, and it was like, though, it's like you're taking a bite of the Mona Lisa. And it was like, okay, that was interesting.
On that topic, then, what is the most expensive bottle of wine you've tasted?
It's probably 1980. I think it was 1986 Henri Jaillet Crot Parent 2 out of Magnum. I think it was around $25,000 or $30,000 for a Magnum, but this is 10 years ago. That same bottle is probably worth $35,000 or $40,000 now. But the worst part was we had like 5 bottles. So the first bottle we opened was great. It was a dinner with Thomas Keller from the French Laundry, myself, and about 20 people sat at this Pebble Beach house overlooking the ocean and sunset. And we were opening up old Krug, old Dom Perignon, back to 64. The 64 Dom Perignon Anotech, single greatest champagne I've ever tasted. The wine spent 50 years resting on lees with a crown cap, was disgorged, and it was like magical. But the worst part was the next bottle was like 85, 86, 88, 89, and 90. We had magnums of Henri Jaillet Crot Parent 2, which is like one of the most special wines in the world. But the second wine was corked, right? And it was like $30,000 to just flush it down the sink. It's a little depressing, but like I would say, first world problems. Yes,
exactly. We're on the farmer part is, how does soil then dictate taste in a wine?
So first and foremost, most people wouldn't understand it, but the more poor the soil for growing anything, the better for grapes, right? So you want poor soil that's mineral. You don't want a lot of really rich soil, because you want the grape to go deep into the earth and extract all of these different minerals that make wines more complex. So, the earth is very, traditionally you have dirt, right? And you have an animal that might pass away. It might bring droppings that, create compost, and things break down and create soil. That's really what it comes down to. And if you remove any sort of chemical inputs, what you have is this normal degradation of, plants and animals and everything that's going on in the world, and it becomes a part of the soil. And there's microbes and fungus and bacteria in the soil that are essential for, for example, rocks are in the soil. Fungus will actually leach onto to these rocks and start breaking down minerals, while the actual root structure of the plant is giving off sugar off these little kind of hairs that come off. And the bacteria is coming and eating the sugar off of the grapevine's root system, right? It has fructose, to the best of my understanding. So the bacteria eats it and creates oxygen. And that oxygenated environment on the root system allows for the uptake of these minerals that have been broken down by the fungus off of the rocks, right? There's a really cool documentary called Symphony of the Soil that anybody listening should watch. And it shows you like why the forest is just, has all this incredible soil bustling with life, and these plants look so healthy, is because that's the way nature evolved. You shouldn't have to take nitrogen and phosphorus and potassium from a laboratory and spray it into the soil. There's other ways of taking natural things and putting into the soil. So if you're talking about Burgundy, Burgundy is my passion. It's most people who have a wine cellar and they've been into wine for 20 years. People want to drink Burgundy. So over time, this area existed underneath a shallow ocean for 180 million years. So the polar ice caps used to be smaller, and the actual levels of the ocean was much higher, covering most of France. A lot of the coastal areas of the world were existing underneath a shallow sea of like 100, 150 feet. So during this 180 million years, you had sea life, lobsters and crabs and whatever that might be, sea urchins. They break down and compress, and that calcium and all of these things kind of compress and created a lot of limestone, right? And then there's geological evolution, tectonic plate shift, creating really compressed limestone over a lot of France. So a lot of the best wines are grown on limestone. And then there's different clay influences, creating one of the most complex areas of the world in terms of geology. And then you take these vineyards, which might be the size of your house or the size of a neighborhood, like a small neighborhood with maybe 15 or 20 houses. And each vineyard has different soil type based on the geological history. So you have each village, like Gevrey-Chambertin, Moray-Saint-Denis, Chambon-Musigny, Flagey-Echezot, Beaune-Romanée, Beaune. Each one of these, the wines, you can put your nose in the glass and they smell completely like that village because of the geology and what's going on in the soil. But within that village, say Gevrey-Chambertin, there are certain producers who are using chemical influences like Roundup and different chemical things. And those wines literally smell and taste somewhat dead, like C grade. And then you have their next door neighbor who's bringing in these natural, teas that they're making and biodynamic preparations, because you're bringing in cultivating all these bacteria and microbes and they're spraying it into the soil. And you're basically creating this life force in the soil that allows for the happiness of the root system of the plant. And I would add to that most people don't know that's illegal to water a vine in France. It's against the law to water a vine. So you can water the vine very young, just like you can give your kid, $2 a day for lunch money, right? But eventually you want that kid to leave and get his own job, right? And if you're giving your kid $50 a day, he's going to be living in your basement when he's 35. The same thing with grapevines, that you want to give them a little bit of water to get started, but then you want the grapevine to struggle. What happens is the struggle of the grapevine causes the grapevine to go deep into the soil, going down 100 feet over 80 to 100 years. These roots go down 10-story building equivalent into the earth to get water and minerals. And these vines sometimes will make one bottle. So you have one vine that is going into this incredible geological history in a village like Moray-Saint-Denis in Burgundy. And you have these old 100-year-old vines making one bottle, and you put your nose in the glass and it's literally like the hair on your arm stands up. And you're just like, it's like the first time you listened to the best song you've ever heard, but it was your nose, and there's like 77 different aromas going on. And then you take a sip, and the texture and the sweetness of the strawberries and the wild huckleberries and that delicate mushroom influence and all these umami delicate things going on are just, this is literally like, chasing the dragon, with Burgundy, that it's these people that, you might not have much money in the bank, but you don't care because you're going to spend all your money on Burgundy because it brings you so much pleasure. That's the difficulty when you really fall in love with wine. You're going to you just get into this trap where that's all you really want is to like drink these great wines and understand why it tastes like that. And then you get together with 10 people, everyone brings a nice bottle of Burgundy from their cellar because they want to share it. And you just have these incredible conversations and you learn about like, what are all these details that really make this wine what it is? And it started 200 million years ago. It's like incredible.
Do you ever get like burnout on wine?
Yeah, I do sometimes. I'll be honest. Yeah. Like, because it's my job, but it's my passion, and, I love my kids too, but sometimes I get burnout on, hearing them cry, everything, too much of anything, you get burnout. But, I do like to drink, mezcal is kind of a new passion of mine, like really good mezcal from Oaxaca. There's different cactuses or agave plants that make incredible experiences. So I just got back from Mexico last week, and a lot of great cocktails from mezcal. It's kind of a way to mix it up. Been drinking hard kombucha to mix it up a little bit. But I do love wine, of course. I love drinking Gruner Veltliner from Austria, dry Riesling, white Burgundy. That's kind of my go-to. If I go, to Mexico, for example, I went for 10 days and I came back and I missed wine, but it was humid and it was hot. And so I brought like 5 bottles. We didn't open anything. So I ended up giving them away to some local people down there who were like from France and Italy. And I popped the cork. I took a taste and I poured it around the pool, and people were drinking like super rare Northern Rhone Syrah, by the poolside at sunset. And they didn't expect it. With some old off-dry Rieslings, and it's pretty cool to be able to share those kind of things. But with that said, I do sometimes get sick of wine, but that's 3% of the time. Most of the time, I do want to drink wine, but sometimes I need a little break.
Yep. How big is your personal wine collection at home?
Not that big, because I live in Napa, and I don't have like a proper cellar. I have a few like wine refrigerators that hold 350 bottles. So, at the warehouse at SommSelect, we have, I don't know, 30,000 bottles right now, probably. But at home, I don't want to keep too much wine. I have a closet that doesn't get above like 72 or 75, even when we're out of town. But I'm at a point that I don't quite have the space to really start a cellar. That's probably going to be, knock on wood, hopefully one day I have a cellar, but it's not in the cards currently. I'm still working on it. We have a business to focus on, and
right.
That's my focus right now. And if I need a bottle, I can drive 16 minutes and pull something from the warehouse. So it's, I'd rather keep the wines at 65 degrees or 60 to 58 degrees. And eventually one day I'll have a cellar.
How can listeners follow you, or where are you at on social media? What platforms?
So I'm on Facebook, Ian Cauble. You can look me up. And I'm on Instagram at Ian Cauble, IANCAUBLE. I don't post that much, but you can follow us on SommSelect. We're posting more often, but it's one thing I should probably do more, is a little bit more Instagram. But I'm so busy, it's hard to like sit down and, post something. There's a lot of exciting things to post. I just maybe need to focus on it more.
I'll put a link to SommSelect's IG page on the show notes as well. So listeners, you can go there, and I would highly suggest you also look at the link to go to SommSelect.com as well. People, they say like the average bottle of wine that people purchase is like less than $12 or $10. Is there a tip for listeners that go, okay, maybe I'll splurge and buy a $50 or $100 bottle of wine? Is there a tip for them to go, I'm going to get a good wine for this price?
Yeah. It really depends on what you're looking for. But if you're looking to spend $50 to $100, I think first and foremost, you should go to a retailer that you trust, that has a good selection, that's kissed the frog so you don't have to. And I think don't always bet on points. The higher the points, typically the richer and sweeter the wine and the more oak. So it depends on the palate. If you find a Napa Valley Cabernet with 91 points, you might like that more than 98 point wine, because the 98 point wine is most likely richer, later harvested, sweeter fruit, and it depends on your palate. So I think, just find a retailer that you trust, and find someone that, have your local internet wine shop, local wine shop that you can walk into in person, and find somebody you trust. Or you can go onto, a credible website and find these wines at a price point and learn about them. And the cool part is, we do have a concierge service at SommSelect. So anybody who's looking to really invest and understand wine, we have people that will call you and walk you through this process. So you can just email info@sommselect.com and we'll put you in touch with the right person. And if you have, $150 to spend on a gift, we can walk you through exactly what it is, send you a recipe to recommend to your friend to have with that old Bordeaux or Brunello de Montalcino or old Rioja. And I think, you just need to have a good advisor to help you make the right choices. Just like if you're going to make a bet on a horse, go talk to the jockey down the way and say, hey, where should I put my money? And there's tens of thousands of options at $100 a bottle, right? What are you going to bet on? And what's the likelihood that brings you pleasure? You don't know. It all depends on what you like, what you've liked historically. And you just have to be able to make a good bet with your money because you worked hard for it.
Mm-hmm. Today's show is brought to you by Aroma Retail. Scent your space. You're going to love the way your home smells. Low cost, simple, and easy to set up and use with no contracts. Scent your space in less than a week with over 80 fragrances, and the fall season upon us, you can get scents such as the Great Pumpkin, Trick or Treat, how about Warm Bread, or even a Zen Temple. Go to the show notes and click on the link and use the code LIGHTS10 for 10% off of your order, or go to beforethelightspod.com/sponsors and click on the Aroma Retail logo. But please use the link. It lets them know that I sent you, and use the code LIGHTS10. Ian, I think we could do a show for about 5 hours on wine and I was
like, what do you mean? We're over already? I was having so much fun. Yep.
and your stories. I mean, I'm telling you, that's got to be a documentary, but thanks for taking some time out of your day and being on Before the Lights.
It's a pleasure, man. Listen, reach out if you're ever in Napa. We got to hang out, and we got to share some good bottles together. I had a lot of fun today.
Yeah, for sure. People, if you would follow the podcast, you can find it anywhere podcast platforms are found. Spotify, iHeart, Stitcher, iTunes. It's anywhere. Please follow the show. Follow us on Instagram at Before the Lights Podcast. Thank you for listening to Before the Lights. I'm Tommy Canale. And until next time, everybody, a salute, a chin chin.